guys, this is Real Talk with Rachel today, and today I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about an article that came out in the Ringer. So a couple days ago, Kelsey came to me and he asked if I had seen this article in the Ringer, and I was like, what's the Ringer? So Kelsey told me that this was a website dedicated to sports and pop culture, and my takeaway from what he told me was that they don't cover boxing, but if they do, they just take it's like an opportunity to kind of crap all over the sport of boxing. The title was "The Biggest Fight in Women's Boxing is Over a Minute," and it was written by Christina Newland. The article was well written, but here's what I found about the article. I found that there were some pretty dramatic accusations in it. And so I want to start with there. And I just want to read some of the statements made in the article. First, here's one. As women have increasingly joined the ranks of professional pugilists, that tradition has become the subject of hotly contested debate. So the different round lengths. As a boxing fan, I haven't noticed anybody debating this. So the idea to call it a hotly contested debate just seemed a little out of place to me. Another example, the sport's major governing bodies want women to take their 2 minutes and shut up. I felt like that was a pretty inflammatory statement to make. Here, however, the 2-minute round length ruling is not based on medical fact. At least it's not based on any facts that have been made public. So the second statement there completely just nullifies the first statement that she made, because we don't know if the 2-minute round ruling is based on medical fact or not. She said earlier in the article that the WBC was unwilling to make public their research and findings. You can make up a story that they have no research and findings, but we don't actually know that to be true yet. So the point is when you're writing something like this and then you make inflammatory statements and wild accusations, I tend not to trust the rest of what you're writing. Also, as a fellow woman, to Christina Newland, I'm a little disappointed. I want women to be strong and wise, and I don't think you have to resort to tactics like this to get your point across. What I would like to see is an open discussion. Clarissa Shields' second televised fight, or it was the fight on HBO, their first women's fight they televised. That's when I was like, oh, 2-minute rounds, that's different. And I was like, in my head, I asked myself, why are there 2-minute rounds? And I was kind of like a little bit like, well, why are they doing that? Like, is there some, like bad motive behind that? But what I told myself is that I didn't know. I was like, well, I don't know what the reasoning is behind that. I would like to know the reasoning behind the different round lengths. And so I think that is perfectly reasonable. So I want people to ask questions and be open to having discussions. But when you start making wild accusations, people get defensive, and then a discussion can't happen. So that was my overall major problem with this article, was that it was hard to take it serious when it was making broad judgments on the sport of boxing, all based on round length. We all know that women across society historically have been treated as second-class citizens. We are working our way to be treated equally, and it takes time. And we've seen it in other sports, like women have made inroads. It hasn't happened in boxing yet. So I feel like before we start jumping to judgments about the 2-minute round lengths, we should ask some questions like, why is it that way? My thought was that 2-minute round lengths were the norm in boxing, and that the change to 3 minutes was the extraordinary thing that happened. So when you already have women's boxing that, from my perspective, hasn't had a lot of women willing to be in the sport, we've had a lack of competition in the sport. It's been hard to find women to box, and it results in having women fight across weight classes. So then we just why would we all of a sudden just change the round lengths when we're having a struggle getting women, more women into the sport? So I feel like there's a lot of thought that needs to go into this before we just start lashing out with judgment and calling people sexist and misogynist and saying things like they just want to hold women down, or women need to take their 2 minutes and shut up. I'm a fan of women's boxing. I think when it's good, it's good. Like there's some sports where I don't like. I'd rather watch men play, but in boxing, that's not the case for me. That Clarissa Shields Hannah Gabriel's fight, that was so good. It was a good fight. An example that was brought up was about the WNBA. So in the WNBA, they use a smaller ball. I remember when I played basketball in high school, I also used a smaller ball. And I remember playing basketball and playing with the boys' ball and thinking, you know, if I always use this ball, I could always use it. The funny thing is when we played pickup games with the guys, they always opted to use the girls' ball because it was easier to use. So if there was ever going to be a change, I would think it should be the other way. But like, I don't hear a lot about like that being a debate. So I just don't like jumping to conclusions in women's boxing over round lengths, especially as a boxing fan when I just haven't heard that much about it. I don't feel like it's a big deal in the sport. And I happen to know, I mean, in the article, she quotes Clarissa Shields, who's not interested in changing the round length. So not all women in the sport want to change it. We could go into depth into this article, like I actually highlighted like all kinds of different things, but I think if you just read it yourself, you'll find that there's a lot of assumptions made and based on either no evidence or anecdotal evidence. If we took all those out, this article would actually be quite a bit shorter, which I think would actually garner more readership because you would just be putting forth the question and asking some follow-up questions and then inviting discussion. So I think that's what we should have. Let's have discussion about it. And let's also ask, why isn't the WBC sharing their findings? I think that's a legitimate question. But instead of jumping to conclusions about it, why don't we just pressure the WBC to release their findings? I guess I just wanted to share my opinion on that as a woman, as a fan of boxing. That's how I felt about the article. This is what I'm asking my fellow women out there. Be reasonable. Be a reasonable human being. Ask questions, don't accuse people of things, don't jump to judgments. I think that the world would be a better place and we can actually have open discussions about things.